if a lot of harm and suffering and neglect can rob a child of 20 years, what can love and attention and support, and I would say fasting with these concepts of sacrifice and delayed gratification, discipline, what years can I add to their lives at a young age? So I just bring this up to say that when we talk about fasting, let's not leave any money on the table. I think that if there's any time in life for a child to really inculcate these rules into their lives, it's got to be when they're young. It's got to be when they're young, and they're going to sidestep a tsunami of problems of addiction and abuse and divorce and all those things I mentioned to you later on as a result. Again, it's God's salve the suffering.
Welcome to the Revo Report. We're inspiring faith with reason and reason with faith.
Whoa, I'm blown away by this. I've watched a few of your interviews. I love how well articulate you are, and you've obviously studied this and lived it out as well. Can we have a part 2 of this?
Absolutely. And you know, what's really cool, again, it's no coincidence that as we talk about fasting, we weave into sort of the philosophical and sort of the scientific. It is the coolest little specialization that bridges both worlds. And so as a result, it's like we could talk about the science, but then like, oh my God, I can't believe that the sympathetic nervous system allows us to solve ADHD and anxiety and the spiritual thing. And so it's very interconnected. And so by all means, Vince, I'm just honored to be on your podcast in general, but let's have part 2 or more in the future. No problem at all. I got 4 kids. I know the reality of picking people up. I'm like a ER doc during the day and a taxi driver in the evening, no doubt.
This work is incredible. It's something that I really need to look into because I've been doing intermittent fasting. We do fasting at our church. We do 2 fasting schedules throughout the year. And I want to look into, doing it at specific times, specific days in the week, and even talking to, our parishioners about it as well. You're just a few hours away from us. I'd like to also extend an invite. If ever you are in the area, come speak at our church about this, share your book if you're willing, because I think, man, people will really benefit from this, especially the knowledge you have, your ability to articulate it, and also just your passion and living it out. So that's incredible, man. I hate to cut it short.
But no worries. I'm long-winded. But no, thank you, Vince. I really appreciate it. And sorry for any of the technological issues here, but I'll make sure my internet connection is a little stronger next time too.
I know that your title with Anton was, I think he titled it the Jesus Diet. I want to ask this one last question, if I could, before we close off. Is there historical evidence, or at least in your studies that you've done, that the Athos Diet is, because of the Orthodox tradition and very close to going back to the church fathers, to the early church traditions, is there evidence that you've seen that this is actually the diet probably of Jesus or probably of the early disciples and the apostles?
I would argue that it probably does mimic it. I don't believe necessarily that Jesus, and I'm only bringing this up because some people will watch this and be like, oh, was Jesus sort of, the greatest good was to prevent animals from being slaughtered. I mean, that was a nice second order effect of being, plant-based, but I don't think that was his highest good. It turns out why he was fasting. So I just put that out there. But what I will say, though, is that I do believe there's plenty of, evidence in the literature, in the canons of the church, as to like bishops and priests are not allowed to slaughter animals, by the way. Monks in the Orthodox Church never eat meat. They can have, at best, dairy and eggs, and then it's all plant-based, and then they go vegan for these other more significant parts of the year. So all of that gives me breadcrumbs to believe that they're practicing a tradition that mimics something that was developed very early on. And again, this is based on readings from various fathers that I've been quoting, but they all seem to resonate with this idea of a plant-based diet, sort of oscillating throughout the year and really limiting the amount of hours that they eat. Something like 1 meal a day, or perhaps in the case of other parts of the year where there's communion and a meal, etc., maybe it's many as 8 hours, but probably not more than that. And so, yes, I think if I know anything about how much these monks try to maintain the way they look, the way they pray, what they do, what they believe, to mimic the apostles of the church and what Jesus told the apostles. I mean, and so I don't think it's a far reach to then believe that perhaps apostles then telling the next generation will eventually go to Mount Athos and populate it, that this is what you're supposed to do. And again, the proof is in the pudding. Like, they don't have the disease. They don't have the high cholesterol and the hypertension and the diabetes, and God's taking care of them. And only because doing it, it's only because they're doing it. I mean, it's not just because they're blessed people and God says you don't have to do the work, but there is a pathway. There is a pathway. I feel like this is the greatest resonation between that scientific insight and that faith mandate. And this is where it all aligns. In the wisdom of the church, let's fast. I do believe that those traditions do come from the early centuries of the church and by extension from Christ himself. Why wouldn't that be the case?
Amen. And would you let us know also, and for those watching, how they can reach you? I know you're on X. I know you have a podcast also on YouTube, and your website is up there. So if you guys want to get in touch with Dr. Pete, he's on X. That's how I got in touch with him. But also the website, check out the website. If you want to check out the book, your book is on Amazon as well. But any other contacts or that you want to share?
No, thank you for asking. It's theathosdiet.com, and you can buy the book on Amazon. We've sold books pretty much every continent on Earth other than Antarctica. I like to think that Kim Jong-un is reading my book right now in North Korea. I even saw someone buy something out that direction on a map. But in any way, yeah, I mean, that's there. And I just think that the podcasts are super high yield. We have a little section on our website, but we try to put them on Twitter as well. And Instagram, we have a little bit of a following there, but it's not as strong. But yeah, I think a lot of that material out there, and it's just great discussion. It's just good, high yield discussion as we talk about something so basic and so meek and so simple, and yet it somehow speaks to every aspect of who we are. And so in that regard, it's really a dynamic discussion. I hope to have more with you, Vince, in the future.
Yeah, I just want to thank you again, man, because before I had backslid, I became an atheist for a period of time. And, I was watching and reading about all these biohacks and all these other things. And oftentimes they would be coming from doctors that weren't Christians. And the emphasis was always just on whether you're going to make more money or improve in your career or be better in your health. But I love this holistic aspect of it. When in Jeremiah, when he says, God has plans for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope, future. The word there is shalom, right? And that shalom is a holistic blessing. And so coming from a Christian doctor like yourself, who's studied these things, I think the Christian world sometimes is split into these two spectrums where, it's ultra spiritualized and, forget the psychology, forget the science, forget the medicine. Let's just focus on the spiritual. But I think you're bridging that gap between, hey, there's actual scientific evidence here and the spiritual world as well. And to live it out is, I think, incredible. And quite possibly moving forward, at least for our Christian brothers and sisters, it could be revolutionary, right? Finally, they have a doctor to say, hey, actually, this doctor has done research on it and it can connect to the spiritual realm. Kudos to you, man. Keep doing the work. Thank you again for being here. I didn't even get through 25% of the questions I had just because I was so intrigued in what you were saying. But yeah, let's for sure connect soon.
Thank you, Vince. Appreciate it. Thanks. I look forward to the next round.
Same here. All right. God bless you, brother.